And we are live. Hello, everyone. Matt Stevens from the Charlotte Observer, here with Rick Bonnell and Langston Wirtz, and we just watched episodes 1 and 2 of The Last Dance, ESPN's new 10-part Michael Jordan documentary series, focusing on MJ and those 97, 98 Bulls, one of the greatest NBA teams of all time. What? I guess the first question I have for you guys is what was how are you feeling after watching this episode? Like your emotions right now?
I wish it was Netflix and you could keep watching. I just think that you have to wait another week. I mean, that was really fast 2 hours of television. It was riveting. It was riveting.
You know, people talk about reality television.
Mm.
That is reality television. It's not contrived. It's authentic. Drama is genuine. I will tell you guys, and I'm sure we'll get into this over time in this discussion. I ended up really feeling bad for Jerry Krause. I mean, he is obviously the drama in this right now, and that's appropriate, but he's not the heel that he's necessarily being portrayed to be. General managers are going to do unpopular things. There's a level of conflict that goes with that job. I found it really interesting at the end when they were talking about how angry Scottie Pippen became at the notion that his name would be in trade discussions. What I find sad about that is, if I've said this for years, if I were a general manager at a meeting before the start of every training camp, I would say to the entire team, I want you to understand that any of one of you might be traded. There's nothing to take personally about hearing your name involved in that. Nobody should think that it's insulting to think that you'd be in trade discussions.
And I guess the thing that struck me about Pippen, I've forgotten about the 7-year, $18 million deal he signed. And if the boss is telling you, hey, man, don't sign this deal, maybe you shouldn't sign a deal. And then you get mad because you're asked to serve out a contract that you signed. And I understand that, people want to renegotiate, especially he was a top 5 player at the time. But, I kind of felt like he had made his own bed and he lied. And incidentally, he ended up making more money than Michael Jordan did from basketball. So, Scottie Pippen turned out okay.
But he made it all in arrears with other teams.
He absolutely. Yes.
With Scottie though too, you're thinking. I mean, he grew up with nothing,
yes.
And he even talked about that too. It's like, I'm not 100% sure I'm not going to get hurt. I need to get paid now, and I need to make sure I have something for my family. Obviously, Scottie had financial issues down the line later on in life, but that was, on one hand, it's like, yeah, your boss is telling you don't take this deal. On the other, I couldn't fault the guy for his logic too. I mean, with what he grew up with, and yeah, that was tough.
Man, I totally agree with that. But the point is, if everybody goes out of their way to make you aware of the fact that you are bargaining away future earning power in return for security, then you need to keep that in mind going forward.
Who was his agent, by the way, back when he was allowing all this to go down? He was a guy that was, should have been just as hated as Krause and set him up for that.
That was rough. I mean, do you think the way Krause is being framed here, and maybe that's not the director's fault, that's really how things went down, but do you feel like the way he behaved in terms of breaking up this team in the end has changed anything in the NBA and the way GMs go about business?
I'll defer to Rick on that question.
Matt, I'll tell you that, somewhat concurrent to this, the Celtics made a corporate decision not to break up the big three when everyone was telling them, that there was huge potential for that to be a mistake. Now, obviously, Reggie Lewis dying made things ultimately worse than that. But, that first playoff series that the Hornets played, it was very interesting, the perception from each of the markets. Everybody down here was like, oh, my God, they're playing the Celtics. They're going to get swept. And everybody in Boston was like, these guys are old. They're decrepit. They're falling apart. So there was such a contrast at that particular juncture of the NBA about whether once you were good enough to contend, should you play it out to the end, or should you start, creating the next dynamic at the first sign that this is not going to hold together?
I kind of, Michael said in the show that, we deserve to finish it out until we get beat. And I kind of agree with that because you just never know, when you give up great players, in the Celtics case, 3 of them, in the Bulls case, 2 of them, you just never know if this is going to come around again. And if they have a chance to go back and win again, I still understand Krause telling Phil, you got to go 82-0 or you're not going to be back again. And I understand that every show has had a protagonist, he's a protagonist of this show, but he did a lot of the things that I can understand why some of the players felt the way they did. Not letting Michael play the last 30 seconds of that game that could have sent them to the playoffs when John Paxson hits the shot. I didn't know that story, and that was interesting to see. But I kind of understand how the players come at him, but I also think he had a whole heck of a lot to do with how good that team was back then.
Well, it would be very interesting. The guy that Michael Jordan was as a player who said that they had the right to stay together as a team.
I know where you're going.
Lost. It would be very interesting if that Michael Jordan had a conversation with the Michael Jordan who decided 6 months ago that they weren't going into luxury tax to have Kemba Walker.
Well, they had Kemba for a lot of years. They weren't getting out of the first round of playoffs. So I kind of agree with that too. It's like, this is as good as we're going to be.
I buy it. I'm just saying everything about life is your point of view.
Absolutely. It comes back. Oh, yes. Big circle. It goes back around. Absolutely.
Well, Rick, you watched Jordan, you covered the league watching Jordan as a player, and now you cover his team as beat reporter for the Hornets. And you mentioned exactly what you said, just saying the right to not break up teams. Do you feel like, knowing Michael, anything that he experienced as a player and going through all of this has changed his approach to management? I know he's not a GM, but he is an owner. He has his hand in everything, to how he goes about day-to-day business and deciding to pay people and not pay people.
I do think this. I think that unlike everybody else in the league, when an agent says to Hornets management, "Oh, you people don't understand," I got a feeling Michael's immediate reaction is, "You're full of crap." I know exactly what's going on. I mean, I thought it was very interesting and very creative, by the way, that Adam Silver, one of the first ways that he utilized Jordan in league-wide politics is Michael is basically the liaison to a large degree between management and players when they get together to solve problems. There's a strong sense in the league. It's been formalized as far as which committees Michael's on, that they feel like Michael can translate management to players and that he can translate what the players think to management. It's been helpful.
I'll jump to a couple of comments just in the chat so far. Trav Roberts says, "Rick, I don't know how you can call this reality or authentic when MJ had final say over the final edits." And just Uncle Luke just talking about how much he misses Kemba. I think all Hornets fans are missing Kemba right now through this rough season, where the Hornets, it'll be really interesting where they're going to pick draft wise. They are not going to be that far back than I thought they would. And that's kind of get off topic, but that is one thing.
Nice they get once in a while. The Hornets just have the worst lottery. It's really nice they could get up higher than they're supposed to.
And that makes me think about going back to interviews with Jordan in '84, and he's talking about coming to the Bulls that have been a terrible franchise. And he says, I want to get this team up to the level of the Lakers. I want to get this team up to the level of the Celtics, and it's going to be a lot of hard work, but I want to do that. And you see the clips of that's pre-United Center in '84. I'm assuming, where it's just empty, and it looks a lot like the Spectrum Center has been for so many games. How often have you seen a player be able to actually take a team like that? And what would it take for a team, I'll pull it locally, like the Hornets, to be able to get a player to elevate them that way?
First of all, it's absolutely transformational. And the whole reason there's a draft lottery is because one guy can make more difference in basketball than in any of the other 3 major sports. I mean, it's not even close. And, the thing, Matt, with the context historically about what you're talking about, it wasn't just the Bulls were messed up. It's the whole league was messed up. I was really glad that they addressed the drug issue in the time that Jordan came into the league. Reputationally, the NBA was in a mess beyond description, it's no exaggeration when people talk about how finals games were tape delayed. It was that bad. When I started covering the NBA in '88, it was exciting and new coming from covering college football and basketball, but there were an awful lot of places where people, saw the NBA as something they just didn't even want to be around.
Yeah, I think there's about 13 or 14 Chicago Bulls players were having to explain to, wives and kids that they were not involved in the traveling cocaine circus at that time. I thought that was very interesting to Rick's point.
Yeah, they're all stuck inside at quarantine right now, and they can't escape their family either. Oh, I mean, what anything in the documentary so far that really shocked you? Anything that you did not know? Well, we got what 8 episodes to go, but there's you guys are coming at it from a different angle. This was I'm gonna your boss here is gonna sound like a child, but I was in elementary school watching Jordan's. I mean, he was everything to me. I did not. You read about things when you get older and hear these stories, but when you're in grade school and I'm here just watching Jordan, I'm just watching in my head the greatest player of all time. I'm not thinking about or even aware of everything that's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And so a lot of stuff to me is still, I'm in this business, but I'm still learning stuff watching this documentary. Did anything jump out to you guys as kind of shocking?
Just some of the Krause stuff.
Go ahead, Lex.
Just some of the Krause stuff. I mean, the 82-0 thing to Phil, there's 30 seconds left in the game. He had on 14-minute time. He was averaging 29 points, by the way, during those 14 minutes, those 5 games. Not able to play the last 30 seconds. I didn't know that stuff. I was like, come on, Krause, that's kind of tough. But I was in college. I started at Chapel Hill when Mike was coming out, and I ran across him, saw him play in the gym, and I seen how great he was. And you saw him in the pros. I remember watching that '86 Celtics game. He scored 63 and hitting James Dorn with a couple of my suite mates and going, I've never seen anything like this. It was just refreshing to see that come back again, some of those highlights. And I just thought the music that they chose to go with those clips was perfect. And I think that some of the people now who want to talk about LeBron and Kobe kind of get an idea of here's how good this guy was. Here's how athletic, transcendent. He just was incredibly athletic. He had the footwork, he had the balance, and to see all that stuff, it just reminded me personally of how good he was, even though you kind of have it in here, just to kind of see it in front of you again was special.
I'm sure at the time the story got around in Chicago. I'm not saying it was a secret until tonight, but the idea that the Bulls trusted Jordan to go back to Chapel Hill, and completely unbeknownst to them, he wasn't just going to Carmichael. He was scrimmaging 5-on-5 in Chapel Hill for 2 weeks, and the Bulls were completely blindsided by that. I can assure you there is zero chance of that happening today. Yeah. If somebody of Michael Jordan's consequence had a serious injury and they let him leave town to rehab it, there would have been
somebody with
a trainer, an assistant coach, the G League liaison, and a dietitian, all sent to Chapel Hill. There is no way in the world what we saw tonight could have possibly happened in 2020.
College players too at this point. I mean, that's how much sports has changed and the business of it. Or college players, you're not going to let your top go play a pickup game with friends because of how much value that athlete has to the university and has to themselves too. It's just, think about Jordan's worth to that franchise and ultimately financial worth to himself for the brand he made himself. If something did went wrong in those 2 weeks in Chapel Hill, it's just crazy to think basketball history is completely different.
Totally rewritten. Yeah, absolutely.
Matt, he literally had what they called a love of the game clause written into his contracts, that he was allowed to play basketball anywhere he wanted to 365 days a year, and nobody had the right to tell him not to. Wow. That's a new thing I also did not realize.
Yeah.
How do you think knowing Michael Rick is feeling watching this documentary, all this come out? Is that people are going to see the other side of him? And you talked to BJ Armstrong about it, that is going to be a side of Michael that a lot of people may not like. How do you feel like he probably is seeing all this come out finally?
I think it's genuine concern on his part. It was, whenever I do long interviews, the last thing that I ask somebody is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't? And when I did that with BJ on Friday, he said, I'm worried for Michael. And I thought, oh, this is going to get interesting. I said, worried about what? And he talked about how, Michael, anybody who's that good at his craft is going to put himself in a situation where he's going to have artistic conflict. And he's, I thought BJ put it well when he said, the public is finally going to look behind a curtain that they've never seen before. I thought it was the other thing that BJ said about that topic that I thought was really interesting is the extent that he said people don't understand. He said they viewed him through Space Jam, they viewed him through the Nike commercials, the Spike Lee stuff, all that stuff. And he said that Michael was intense during every season that BJ was around him to not let that interfere for 1 second with what they were trying to do with the Bulls. That he had this amazing ability to compartmentalize different aspects of his life. It doesn't surprise me all that much because the same guy who could stay up all night playing blackjack in Atlantic City was also the guy who was totally ready on game day, at the shoot around, before the game, during the game, to give his best.
Yeah, I think that's something that also came out when he came back from baseball and they failed. They lost to Orlando in disappointing fashion. He had to film that movie Space Jam the next summer. And then he was—
Nick Anderson, that snotty comment.
Yeah, he's trying to get back in shape. Anderson said he's done. He's trying to get back in shape for the next season, but he's got to film this movie. So it gets put into his contract to build a big facility on site. And at first they were going to make it an outdoor court, just draw some lines on the asphalt. And they said, no way Michael Jordan's going to play on this asphalt. So they built this big, humongous parachute-like place. It looks like a big, giant parachute. And it cost $10,000 a day, I read, the air conditioning place. And all kind of celebrities started coming, all kind of NBA players started coming. Michael ended up putting on 8 pounds of muscle, got back in shape, and the rest is history. But it just shows his dedication to what he's doing.
What about it do you feel like, what did Michael do in this when you talk about stuff coming out about him? Do you think, in your opinion, the worst light of these 2 episodes?
The Krause stuff, I guess. I mean, he kept, he was really on Krause about how small he was and the diet pills keeping you short and lowering the rim for warm-ups. I mean, he and Krause did not get along. It didn't seem like very many people like Jerry Krause, but I didn't take that as something horrible. I think there may be something that comes up later in these episodes that's worse than that, but that's kind of what I got out of these first 2.
I would agree, and I'll amplify that just a bit. I don't think that at least what they've shown so far, people will be taken aback by how he interacted with his teammates in practice.
I think it's competition.
He's a little cold to Burrell though. When they were overseas, when Burrell's want to celebrate his championship, he didn't even look at him. He said, "This doesn't count."
Okay, what the hell is the McDonald's championship?
But what I'm saying is,
I mean, I'm with him, but I'm just
yeah. No, I get it.
The way that he treated Krause like an annoying servant, it did not speak well at all. And something, it looked like it looked like pretty much everybody who mattered on that team talked down to Jerry Krause at various times. I realize these are artists. I realize these are really special people, but that was the guy who assembled that team.
Right.
And he deserves some level of respect for that.
Absolutely. And I think the leader of the team, being Michael, going at Jerry, empowered the other players to go at Jerry. And I think Michael has always been known to carry a grudge, as we all know. He remembers every little thing. And I think that, all the things over the years kind of built up with him with Jerry. But I agree with Rick that, Krause did not get enough credit. And it was also made, the point was made in the show that Krause also had that Napoleon complex. He just had to be given credit for everything. And I think the combination of 2 things kind of butted heads all the time. And it created an interesting dynamic on the Bulls. Broke
Were
him
you
up.
guys shocked that Jerry Krause would be such a crass person that he would not invite Phil Jackson to that wedding?
Yeah, like I said, he invited some of that stuff. Yeah, yeah, that was shocking. I don't really get I didn't know the dynamic between the two of them, Rick, and maybe you do, but why it was so bad between he and Phil Jackson. Yeah. I hope they really get into that, because that's something I don't know.
Oh, it's interesting. They started talking already about, courting Tim Floyd out of Iowa State. Just how that all worked out. And I mean, well, they didn't really get into how it worked out. We know how it worked out,
Yeah.
but that's just me having talked to Tim a few times for college basketball stuff. It's just really interesting hearing all the basketball world's all connected. You guys know it. Langston knows it. He got your kid's uncle is quote unquote uncle is Muggsy Bogues. That's basketball world is a small world. And it's really just interesting seeing all this.
They call that man Worldwide Wes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Langston, speak of your kids, I mean, did they watch this tonight?
Absolutely. Yeah, we were all upstairs watching. My wife was on the floor. We were on the sofa watching, and my baby boy thinks LeBron James is the GOAT, and I'm always telling him, I said, no, he's number 2. This guy's the GOAT. And I think, I was watching when Michael would do those moves, and he'd kind of put the ball in one hand and score, and Kamani's mouth was like, he had anything like that. So I think for a lot of kids, I mean, you see Michael in highlights, and you can see him on YouTube, but it's just different to see him in this kind of piece, or to like watch the entire game. And even when you watch him on YouTube, it's not like going through the seasons of Michael Jordan. He was on another level of anything I've ever seen from any athlete, maybe in my lifetime, maybe other than Tiger Woods. He was just every night he played great. I mean, he just didn't take nights off. He didn't have load management. He didn't have an ankle that he didn't play through. He kind of understood that this is my one night to see you. I'm in Utah, and it's the only night I'm ever going to see you play. And he put on a show for that guy in Utah. And I think that's something that's lost in today's NBA.
It's something that watching him play to some degree, sustained off and on during tonight, reminded me of that I had lost sense of. Steve Javie was doing the NBA's Twitter account tonight, and somebody asked Steve if Michael was hard to ref. And Steve said, no, actually, Michael was really easy to ref, because unlike a lot of other players, he didn't create false contact. He was so good at avoiding contact to actually get to the rim that if he made contact with somebody, it was the other guy's fault. And after I saw Steve tweet that out, I was watching some of the action sequences, and it struck me that Michael's ability to change directions so suddenly, so dramatically, so quickly, because we probably remember the last 10 years when he became, more of a jump shooter.
Yeah.
We forget his ability to get from point A to point B, even if he changed directions 5 times, was astounding. There was no way to stay in front of him.
Yeah. No, 80s Michael was, I mean,
yeah.
it was just unreal. I mean, the stuff he could do athletically. He had a 48-inch vertical leap. He could run a 4.40. To be able to go that fast and jump that high, that suddenly, he would just jump over guys with those big hands and dunk the ball in like Julius, but he was faster than Julius, and he could jump higher than Julius. It was incredible. And then he could morph himself from being an average shooter to a great shooter for the second half of his career. It was like there were 2 different Michael Jordans. They're probably the 2 best players we've ever seen.
Well, they're hinting at that what's coming up with them and the Pistons for the upcoming episodes, and how that you look at how athletic Michael Jordan was, and he was obviously, but he was skinny it looks like pre the bad boys of the NBA beating him up. He was, and then you think of how I think of Michael Jordan in mid-late 90s, and just muscles on muscles, and those arms, like not huge arms, but just ripped, and it's just he changed his body, but didn't necessarily change his game.
Yeah,
he was just toughened up.
Yeah, the Pistons beat him up really bad. He hired a personal trainer. The guy had written every player on the Bulls saying, I want to train you to avoid injury. And none of them would write back. Michael finally invited him to come work out with him, gave him 30 days. And that was kind of the genesis of that, getting in shape to beat the Pistons, getting stronger to take the beating. I think they hinted to that during one of the commercials. I'm really looking forward to see how Isaiah, who participated in this, talks about Michael, because Isaiah has not been kind to Michael over the years in terms of his comments. And but they'd always ask who's the best player. He'd always defer to somebody else. Just a couple of weeks ago, he said LeBron. I'm like, come on, man. And Bill Laimbeer was on one of the ESPN shows and said LeBron was better. And I know they have to stay in character because they're the bad boys. But I'm just curious that's one of the parts I'm looking most forward to seeing is the bad boys, because I was a huge Bulls fan at the time, and they could not beat Detroit, just could not beat Detroit. It was really frustrating every year.
I don't think people remember how markedly different the NBA game was played then.
Yeah.
Mike Jaminski laughs all the time at the things that are called flagrant fouls right now. It would have barely been regular fouls 20 years ago. Larry Brown, he was out of the league right before, for like 2 years before he started coaching the Hornets. And that was when the league told you had to stop hand checking. You couldn't put your hands on whoever had the ball. And I remember Larry coming back and having to adjust to that. And he told me that he thought that was the biggest change in the rules other than the 24-second clock in the history of the NBA. And when I said to him, illustrate what you mean by how dramatic a change that is, he looked at me and he said, not only would Michael average 50 a night with these rules, but he wouldn't have to try to do it.
Yep, and he'd also be a better three-point shooter.
Does that count as hand checking? Or is that just good D?
Back then,
the back end doesn't count, but yeah, I know what you're asking.
So, you guys started bringing up in the chat, starting to light up about is Michael versus LeBron, and it's just the debate. I don't think there is a debate because I don't think LeBron will. You said the eras of basketball are completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And the chat's talking about, hey, MJ's the GOAT. Hey, you can't talk about LeBron. You can't compare them. Someone said you can't compare them. I said you can't compare them because they played 2 different times. The game was different. Their style was different.
LeBron would be good during that time, though. He'd still be an all-star. It's Michael today, though, when you can't touch him and you can't blow on him. And he would be a 38, 39% three-point shooter. I mean, he would. I mean, it's just like Rick said, he'd average 40+ points a game. I mean, easily. There'd just be no answer. And young Mike coming up now, oh my God. I mean, it'd be unreal. I don't think people nowadays kind of comprehend the type of athlete that he was, and he became one of the best shooters of all time as well. KD said it in a chat with I'm losing my train of thought. He said it in the chat just the other day that he thinks Michael Jordan's one of the 5 best jump shooters of all time. He just didn't miss. He shot 50% for his career from a guard. It's amazing.
They ESPN today, their stats department ran a graphic of his shot chart from that last season of championships with the Bulls. And I just laughed after, I've written so much this season about shot value and Borrego, driving people to either, threes or get to the rim, but that stuff in the middle, we just don't want any part of. It was striking about the fact that, Jordan launching from outside that 3-point line, that might have happened once or twice a game. And at the time, he wasn't particularly good at it. But the point is, he would have adapted to the times. He would have, I totally agree with you that if the game required him to make 24-foot shots all the time, he would have just re-engineered himself, much like Marvin Williams did, only more so.
In the 92 finals, when they played Portland, all the talk was that Krause was better than Michael Jordan, and mainly because he's a better outside shooter than Michael Jordan. And that was kind of the shrug series when he made all the 5 threes in the first half. And after that series, they said, he said Clyde Drexler used to be a better 3-point shooter than me. So whatever he needed to do, and they alluded to it, his dad did in the piece, is that if he told Michael he couldn't do something, then he'd go and do it. He just was a ballerina almost playing basketball with just the ultimate ability. He could just morph and turn into whatever he needed to be, which in today's NBA would be a 3-point shooter.
By the way, the shrug game,
yeah,
the Observer covered that final. I was sitting in the end zone, with 100 other, writers.
Yeah.
And when Michael just turned around and looked at the booth and went, I've never seen people on deadline we all just burst out laughing because it was so spontaneous and so unrehearsed. And it was like he was pantomiming what we were all thinking, which is, what is he doing?
Yeah, because he wasn't a good 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
What were you guys looking forward to the most the rest of this series? What were you hoping to see?
Gosh, definitely want to see the Piston stuff like I talked about. I hope they show a little bit more of the second three-peat and the whole. I want to see a lot of Dennis Rodman and Carmen Electra. I want to see all of that. I just want to see everything. I mean, this could be 20 hours for me. I mean, this is just fascinating to me.
I thought it was really interesting. When you do these docudramas, you want to make sure that the last thing people see will suck them into the next thing they see. That was really interesting that they basically ended tonight's second episode with Michael saying, I think Scotty was selfish, in talking about how he handled his contract situation. I think watching how, everybody made peace with that will be very interesting. And the other thing that, they didn't really get into, which I think will be full of drama, is the specter of Phil being gone and how that meant, I think what we see about how they deal with Tim Floyd, somewhere in the background somewhere, and how Tony Kukoc, who, by the way, if you think that Jerry Krause got the treatment, Tony Kukoc got a really rough hazing from both Jordan and Pippen, letting him know that he wasn't all that before, after he was drafted, but before he came to Chicago. It will be very interesting how they deal with the whole Kukoc becoming, part of this big three.
Oh, that was the Dream Team stuff too, right? When they jumped on the score. Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, there's so much material with Michael Jordan over the years. I mean, it's just I'm just really looking forward to it. I'm glad ESPN moved it up because we had nothing to watch. I'm curious to see what the ratings were for tonight. I really want to see how many millions and millions of people watched.
Like the moon landing.
And how does this compare to like an NCAA championship game, the Super Bowl? I mean, some big sporting events during the year. How does this compare?
My wife pointed this out. So my wife pointed this out like last week is, what? Even if you have a bad TV show, launch it now because people are going to watch it. Ratings are going to be great. And this was not a bad TV show though. This was extremely entertaining.
Scottie Pippen's on ESPN. I'm really curious to see what he has to say tomorrow about what he thought tonight.
Well, it's late. We'll have to work tomorrow, but I appreciate you guys joining me. Hoping to do this again next week if y'all are up for it. For the Charlotte Observer's, Langston Wirtz, Rick Burnell, I'm Matt Stevens. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you next week.